My title today is Purge Out the Old Leavening and That You May Be a New Lump. That's in case so when I put this on YouTube. And this is basically a part 2 to what I was speaking on last time. The last one I spoke on examining yourself. That was only the first part. So now you examine yourself, you figure out what's wrong. As we know, and we'll go into it in a second, the Days of Unleavened envision us removing leavening out of our life and becoming a new lump that's unleavened. I want to start with a quote. Pascal makes a very good, I'm going to pick on this guy for the summer. I can already see this, but that's okay. There are some areas he didn't do good, but there was a lot of good quotes. He really sat down and thought his life out. He already went through a lot in his life. He was a man who was sick when he was young, wasn't expected to live, and due to a miracle, he considered a miracle, he survived his youth, and then he became a great mathematician and so forth. And that's something that you can look up later. His quote is, "There is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of every man, which cannot be filled by any created thing, but only by God, the Creator, made known through Jesus Christ." I thought that was a very good one because that's true. People try to fill in this void that they have in their hearts. And we're going to go into that today. I'm sure Ian has a message that will also help on that concept. If we wouldn't mind, turn to 1 Corinthians 5, 7 through 8. And in their case, they were dealing with a situation, and this is what led to the conversation in this. And it turns out that this was near the days of unleavened bread, so it gave Paul a very good opportunity to speak on the days of unleavened bread. And it says in verse 7, "Therefore purge out the old leavening, that you may be a new lump, since you truly are unleavened. For indeed Christ, our Passover, was sacrificed for us. Therefore let us keep the feast, not with old leavening, nor with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth." The Greek word, I was just for the fun of it, I think yesterday afternoon while I was waiting for Ian to come back from checking out the feast site, because I got a little worried. I didn't know how windy those roads were. But purge means to clean thoroughly. Not just purge like I do with my books at home when I decide I want to get rid of a few books and go, I don't know. It means to thoroughly clean, thoroughly purge when you look for something. And by the way, the word unleavened doesn't just mean unleavened. The Greek word actually points directly to the feast, the day of unleavened bread. I looked at it and it says specifically refers that direction. And you notice he says to keep the feast without leavening and so forth, but with unleavened bread of sincerity. I looked that up the other day. Sincerity means clearness. Just like Ian, I think, said the other day. Clearness or pure inner motivation. So the word means even more than what it meant. I like your studies too, Rick, because you'll go into the Hebrew and go, there's a little bit more mentioned in here than you think. Truth, again, is the idea of, Greek implies truth of idea, reality, and truth in the moral sphere. So Paul was using to the Corinthians the unleavened bread, and as it says in this commentary, the apostle takes the occasion to mention leaven, to exalt the Corinthians to put away vice and sin. And the Jews do this, of course. They take it as that way, because when I was talking to Isaiah, they do take leavening as that. And to become a new lump. But this new lump is to be without leavening. So what would be... So let's kind of look just quickly what would be leavening and unleavened traits. Ephesians 5, 1 and 2. Paul did mention Christ in there, that he was our Passover. He says, therefore be imitators of God. Ephesians 5, 1 and 2. Therefore be imitators of God as dear children, and walk in love as Christ also has loved us and gave himself for us, an offering and sacrifice to God, a sweet aroma. So we are to imitate God. That would be like the unleavened. We would be taking in the unleavened. It would be we're taking in God. And we are to walk in love as Christ did, sacrifice for himself. As Rick said during the Passover service, he loved us so much, and it was from the foundation. He loved us so much, he took the beatings, and he didn't say a word. And those beatings were rough. I mean, I'm not going into it. We've already passed all that. But the point is, he did. He did it for us. And in verse 8, talking about us, Paul's telling the Ephesians, for you were once darkness. And that's true. Many of us who discovered the church when we were a little bit older, we would keep certain things like Christmas, Easter, do other things. We'd have problems in our life. But it says, and then continue, but now you are in the light. You are light in the Lord. Walk as children of the light, for the fruits of the Spirit is all goodness, righteousness, and truth. Finding out what's acceptable to the Lord. So we are to adjust our lives. We're to start walking in the truth and the way God gave us. And that's not easy when the world tells you that that is not the way to go. You're fighting like the salmon up in where's the salmon at that go fight the river that spawn. And many of them don't make it, but they fight that river. Is it Seattle or in what?
I know that all the rivers up there, Snake River, different ones, Tahoe, Tahoe River coming out of Tahoe.
There's salmon
South
that
Tahoe.
go up. And then back.
Those are the little.
Well, I'm not implying we die, okay? But we fight the world current. I mean, the world tells us go one way, and then we're trying to go to a certain goal, like those fish are going to a certain spawning area. We fight it because the world is pushing us a different direction. And that's what it meant by darkness. You know, you try to tell someone about the days of bread, even though you can show if they claim to be Christian. I'm not saying they aren't or are, but they say they're Christian, but yet then they don't read that Paul said to a Gentile church, let you keep the feast. This is not wasn't a Jewish church. Now, in Colossians 3, this is the leavening we put out. Therefore, put to death your members which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanness, passions, evil desires, covetousness, which is idolatry. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience, in which you yourselves once walked while you lived in it. So we're to put away uncleanness and evil desires and so forth. Now, and then he continues, but now you yourself have put off all these: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy language out of your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you have put off the old man and his deeds, and put on the new man, who is renewed in knowledge according to the image of him who created him. Where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcised nor uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, so forth, but Christ is all in all. Everything focuses to Christ. And we're to put off, like we were talking about bitterness. I know a person in a church, we will keep his name, I actually remembered his name this morning, but I just didn't care, who is still mad at another church member from 7, maybe 8 years ago, because it's been a while since I've been there. And his wishes condemned this guy to die in purgatory, and he's so mad. I'm like, but the thing is, this guy is in a good church now. He was booted out of one of our major churches, United or something, by this deacon. But he's now in a good church. He's an elder, and he's all this, but he's still so mad at that person who did him wrong 7 years ago. He hadn't got over it yet. And I told him once that he really needs to get over it, because forgiveness is a key part of Christianity. You've got to forgive, but bitterness is not something you allow in your life. Now, we were talking about sincerity. This is my last verse, Rick. Don't worry. I was just going to say that we were told to put on sincerity and truth in that order. My last verse today would be in the same chapter, Colossians 3, 12 through 16. It's an encouragement to the group. Now that we know we are to put away our sinful ways, we first examine ourselves, then we realize the flaws, then we remove it, and we become like Christ. Paul says, and this is under the title of Character of the New Man. It says in verse 12 through 17, therefore, as the elect of God, which we are, holy and beloved, put on tender mercy, kindness, humility, which we talked about in the Passover service, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing one another, which can be a challenge depending on who you are with, bearing one another, and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, as you also must do, But above all these, put on love, which is the bond of perfection, and let the peace of God rule in your heart, to which also you were called in one body, and be thankful. We're one body. In verse 16, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, or in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your heart to the Lord. And whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him.